are available or common to the Northwest region? We'll start with you, Zoe.
I would say the most common policies that I see that come across my desk is obviously the multi-current policies. That could fall within yield protection. Revenue protection is obviously the most common. Some other things would be crop hail. There's been a lot of wind looked up the last couple of years, given just the weather we've had. I also do a lot of LRP, which is the livestock management, PRF, and then annual forage, which is more your rainfall programs. But I would say that's the most common, I guess.
Yeah, that's, I mean, we all have our personal private products that the individual insurance companies can sell, but as far as federal policies, that pretty much does it. Yeah.
I mean, the main two policies we do have here is the revenue policy and an enterprise unit. Zoe mentioned the YP. We've pretty much done away with that just because of our fluctuations in prices. So that's pretty much where we're at today.
Do you guys want to try and talk some of the ones that are more like one answer?
Yes, because they're both, they answer the same thing across the board.
Okay, just tell me for each question. So the second one, one answer,
We don't have a lot of difference in our answers because RMA regulates our crop insurance.
Okay.
So all of our answers should be the same, unless we're talking about private products.
All right, so I'm going to start with Ben on this one. How does one calculate MPCI coverage?
Well, of course, our February price on corn, rice, sorghum, sunflowers, soybeans is all calculated on the November, December futures during the month of February. So we're taking the price, mainly times the level of coverage. Then we're also going to throw in a volatility. So the volatility is extremely important when we're calculating crop insurance. The lower the volatility, the cheaper our premium is going to be. Right now our volatility is running at 0.20, which is pretty high. And the reason why that fluctuates is because it's how our markets are going. So our markets are going up and down and up and down. Our volatility is going to be higher. So therefore our premium is going to be higher. And that's pretty much how we're figuring. And it's all due through the RMA and federal government, so we have no control of what's coming back to you.
All right, we're changing the format just a bit. A lot of these questions kind of just have one answer, so there's no need to go through all three. We'll have a few at the end where we'll go through all three, so it just depends on the question. Does anyone have any questions about the last discussion that I just had here?
What's a typical volatility factor? Do you do that off the top of your head?
We've seen it down to 1.7. You've probably seen it lower than that at one time.
Yeah, average is probably between 18 and 23.
Yeah, pretty close around here.
All right, we're going to go to Kelly on this one. If a farmer is in revenue protection, RP, on their MPCI policy, how is coverage calculated for lost revenue?
Okay, on the RP policy, we have the base price, which is set in, I guess, right before planting. And then we have the harvest price, which of course says we set it at harvest time. If one is higher than the other, they take the higher of the two, multiply it times your APH, times your coverage level, and that will give you your dollar guarantee. To determine whether there's a loss or not, you take your production to account, how much you harvested or how much the adjuster came out and appraised your field for, times the harvest price, and if that number, and of course these are all affected by your share, we're assuming 100% share. So if your harvest price calculation from your production account is lower than your production guarantee, you get a revenue payment.
Any questions?
anybody that has crop insurance and thinking about deferring it, that does play a factor in terms of what you can defer from one income tax year to the next too.
And losses are always designated, production losses and revenue losses, so if you have those, you're able to very easily be able to tell you what is what.
Do you have any kind of spreadsheet to analyze and see which is the optimal choice we should make?
Whatever suits your operation the best. It's almost time to start running quotes, so we can run quotes for whatever kind of situation you want. You know, it all depends on your operation. Are you to the point where you don't need all the extra coverage? You don't have any cash rent payments, you don't have any crop share, you don't have to worry about tractor expenses. You have all those things covered, then maybe you want to look at a enterprise unit if you're farming fairly close together. If you're not farming close together, then maybe that's not for you. Always, too, I think hail insurance is important, especially in our area. You either get it every year, or you don't get a drop of rain, one or the other. So, we'll bring you some quotes, Tim.
We've had this issue, you know, talked before that, a lot of it, how much protection do you need when you're talking to Kyle as a loan officer, you know? Enterprise years, great thing, just not so much for here because our loss situation. And you know, I've seen guys lose $300,000 on a claim service because they went to an enterprise unit, you know, so just be careful.
Yeah, enterprise limits will lower your premium by 65%. So they're very cheap, but you are taking on that additional risk for yourself. If your fields are all close together, your APHs are similar, maybe it's for you. We are fortunate now that we can separate your irrigated acres from your dryland acres. So you don't have to put those irrigated non-loss units in with your devastating dryland losses.
What's the, and I know it's real tough, what's the cost comparison to like option units versus enterprise plus mail coverage in the background? So a lot of times in my mind, grounds are typically widespread, hail movements maybe not so much, so
Right.
do you see similar protection there?
Well, the option in there would be that you can pick and choose where you want to put your stuff. I mean, if you are getting by cheaply on your multi-peril, maybe you can rack up that hail premium if you're the one that always gets zapped every year by the hail. It's just whatever we want you to put on your hail. Wherever you're at, I will make it work for you.
Do you see any place where the area type coverages work at all? Because that kind of consistent with what you just talked about, enterprise units versus otherwise. Is there any slot, any place where people have made that work to their advantage?
As far as the area-wide multi-peril, I have not seen that.
We have such specific, he also
Yes.
wants specific
You know,
field problems.
and, well, like in our rainfall index products, you know, you're looking at a 17-mile grid, which we all know that your neighbor gets the rain and you don't, so that's not a happy situation either. So, area-wide, county-wide, no, we don't have a lot of interest in that in my agency. We do utilize the enterprise units quite a bit. And an enterprise unit, for anybody that doesn't know, is where you take all your crop per county by irrigated practice. So you put all your dryland acres in an enterprise unit, all your irrigated acres in a different enterprise unit. And like I said, that does bring down your premiums to almost a cut by 60%. It's something to look at if you're able to do that. You sometimes raise that coverage level up to 80% and be able to afford that premium of opposed to, the optional unit basis where each field is covered by itself.
You have to be hoping for mutual suffering for that, something like that.
Right, you have, like I said, that all comes to, where are you at in your operation? Are you making, cash rent payments? Are you, still paying for that tractor? Are you making land payments? Enterprise units may not be for you. You may want to stay with your optional units.
And field variability has a lot to do with that too, right? Like if, one field cannot produce the rest, and you're not gonna get a claim in enterprise, it's just.
For the cables.
Yeah, on that enterprise, obviously you differentiate between dryland and irrigated. You're always looking at it from an operator share too, right? So, I mean, I know I've got a lot of folks with multi-entities, multi-operators too. That same is true for the operators as well, though, correct, right?
Yes.
It's not based on landlord, just, y'all look at it as operators and
Yes,
really you care less whether it's owned versus rented.
absolutely.
So,
And if you go from optional unit to an enterprise unit, or, as we go from levels of coverage from 70, 75, 80, just remember, if we have to jump from a 70 to an 80, it almost doubles your premium for a 10% bump.
The enterprise units are just for farmers primarily and not for landowners?
No, anybody that has a crop insurance policy can utilize the enterprise unit.
Would, if you had multiple operators on your land that you were renting out?
The requirement for an enterprise unit is 2 fields of at least 20 acres in 2 different sections. So as long as you can meet that, requirement, you are eligible for it, and of course that's per county.
Whether you're
Whether you're a landlord or a tenant, it doesn't matter.
Any other questions? All right, Zoe, we're back to you. What perils are covered by crop insurance, and how does one file a claim if their crop is damaged?
We all really hope you file within 72 hours of finding the loss. That will happen, right, Kelly?
Yes.
Yeah. Losses that are covered is things that are very common to this area. You have winds, you have hail, heat, drought, disease, fire, pest, the list kind of goes on, but anything that's pretty common, you guys have all seen them across your farm. It's also, when you turn in a claim, it's really nice to know exactly maybe what you found or what caused that loss. Obviously one I didn't list was yield, which is obviously the most common peril. But when an adjuster goes to work your claim, the value of knowing what that peril is also very helpful.
Questions?
If you have a fire, by any chance, if you start it or your machine starts it, you're not covered. But if the neighbor starts it and it blows over on your field, the wind covered it over, so you are covered.
Moving on to the next question, we'll go back to Ben for this one. If a farmer is interested in double cropping, how does that affect their crop insurance coverage, and are there any specific rules to do so?
Well, we do not have double cropping in our area, so, the only time we can actually probably do a double cropping situation is if we have an irrigated unit, we harvest weed off of it, say you must go back with sunflowers, we can start the insurance on that, we've done it a few times. But otherwise, if there's a loss, you will not be able to go back with double cropping, so that's pretty much the rules there.
All right. Any questions on that? All right, back to Kelly. How do planting dates affect insurance coverage? For example, what happens if a farmer plants corn after May 31st in northwest Kansas?
Late planted crop is reduced 1% of your guarantee per day. If you plant June 10th, then you're gonna have a 10% deduction in your guarantee. The only way that we're going to get any changes made to planting dates is to have those crops reported at the appropriate times. If you're always gonna, well, I planted 9,000 acres May 31st, then that RMA does not see that we are able to grow corn that is planted on June 10th. So it's very important to put accurate planting dates on your acreage reports. Crops are reviewed on a cycle. I think it's like every 3 years the crop is reviewed for tea yields, planting dates, all those good things that we need on our crops. So it's very important to put the right date on, even if it is a late planted date.
Any questions?
Does the planter sitting in the field count, Kelly?
It's the completed planting date, not that.
It's the date complete.
Several years
It
ago,
is completed.
they said if we make one round it, then it works, right?
Yeah, so they would get around that like the field that they have.
Kelly's got that covered.
No, yeah, definitely, it is completed. Date planting is completed.
Yeah.
I think it says it on our forms now. It didn't used to.
And if you have a late plant date in the late plant period, say you plant on the 3rd and on the 6th, you can split those acres out.
So you're only getting those duck on those acres that you planted late.
So you split the acres out.
Yes, if you planted, 150 acres on May 31st, but you didn't get the others planted until June 10th, report those 150 and the remaining acres as June 10th. Put those different planting dates on there.
Did I see a question over here? Or was that? Maybe it was. Okay. Moving on then. Back to Zoe. What policy options are available to cover against rainfall, and explain the difference between PRF and annual forage?
Well, I'll be pretty similar on this. There's two popular policies that have became very well used in this area the last couple of years. The first one being PRF, which is pasture, range, land, and forage. For guys in the room with perennial crops, grass, or alfalfa, those acres are eligible. RNA hasn't quite come out and said yes or no, so we're all just running with the fact that irrigated alfalfa can also be insurable. It's quotable, so we're letting it be on policies. Like Kelly mentioned earlier, that is an area-based plan, a 17 by 17 mile gridded index policy. All of those acres would fall in grids based on your farm track and fields at FSA. You can have those acres on shared policies, or those can be 100% based on your situation, I guess. The other one would be an annual forage-based policy. It operates very similar to PRF. You have months of coverage throughout the year, and it's also a graded policy. Those are for triticale, alfalfa, or triticale, any annually based crops, I guess. Those can also be insurable for irrigated. Any questions on those? Who's all heard of them? Because surely a lot of people have.
The rainfall index, insurance, who is that through? Is that through the
It's,
RMA or?
yeah, it's federally regulated, yeah. It costs, PRF costs, those signups are in December 1st is that deadline. I would say average cost is about $5 on pasture acres. That gets up to about 8 or 9 on alfalfa, especially if you're looking at irrigated. And then annual forage is about the same, but that deadline to sign up is July 15th. You don't have to have all your acres reported, obviously, by July 15th, but throughout the year, acres can be reported, so.
Alright. For the next three, we're going to go ahead and have each of our panelists answer them. So next question, when discussing adding SEO or ECO, what's the main difference between the two, and how do I know if I'm eligible?
Both are two very popular additions that most guys have been able to do the last couple years. There's been a couple different things with both of them that are really important to know. SEO is supplemental coverage option. It allows you to cover up to 86% off of your normal RP policy, so that could be from 70 or 75 up to 86. That is subsidized at 65%. That is, again, based on county-based coverage, so that is not your individual farm coverage. You would have your individual farm coverage like you have in the last policy. SEO would allow you to cover up to 86% of your county's average yield or average revenue. ECO, that has become more attractive, especially in 2025 here. They did raise subsidies from 44% to 65%. Many of you have probably looked at that a little bit more than SEO. It also allows for a little bit of higher coverage than SEO. ECO allows you to cover from 86 up to 90 or 95%. So that is the highest coverage option that we see across the board. In your options, that can be by crop, so you could look at that on different ways for your farm. That cost, last night I was running some quotes, this general area like Logan Grove County, kind of where I sit, that gets to be anywhere between 8 or 9 bucks of coverage. On ECO, last night the quote I ran was running about 85 bucks of additional coverage for ECO at a 95% coverage rate. So those are just a couple of different options. With ECO and SEO, SEO does have a requirement at FSA office. You have to be in PLC. So I think we'll talk a little bit about ARC and PLC a little bit later, but that is a requirement for SEO. With ECO, there's no limitation. So you can still be in ARC County as you guys make those decisions here. That did get extended to April 15th, your ARC and PLC decisions, but ECO allows no stipulations with that. Questions?
In Thomas County, SCO is running right at 942 on a policy I pulled up. ECO in Thomas County is running 665 at a 95% coverage.
I think one thing to note, this is like no surprise to you guys, but one thing that I always like to make note of is your normal 70%, if you've been in that for a couple years, you're starting to review that, right? You're looking at 70 or 75%. We mentioned you're looking at enterprise units, you're looking at optional units. You have a number in your head about what you want to spend per acre in risk management. You also have a number in your head that you need to cover on your cost per acre. So I would say, knowing that cost of production has went up in the last couple of years, we all know that, right? ECO and SEO has become really attractive. So just make sure you're looking at that by March. That's a very similar deadline to your multi-term.
So ECO, just so I have this right, SEO I understand it, and PLC. For ECO, what is it an add-on? It's an add-on to regular revenue-based coverage.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so do you have to go all the way up to 85% and then add ECO on top of it, or how does that function?
There's a deductible from your underlying policy. So 70 or 75, there's a deductible then to 86.
Okay, so then you go to 86.
But you're right, Dan, you can stack, 70 or 75%, then you could add SEO if you'd like. It's gonna get really pricey, and then ECO. They are stackable.
So the ECO would be a way to get to 80 and 85 cheaper maybe than through revenue coverage.
Right, and it allows up to
And
95.
is ECO area coverage, or is that in?
Correct.
So that's a way to add the area coverage on top of the individual.
And each county has an expected yield and a final yield, which determines the payments on ECO and SCO. So that may be something you'll want to look at too.
And those payments, if you do get an SEO or ECO payment, they're very different. You're not gonna get paid that at the time that your multi-peril claim gets worked. Those payments will not come out until they finalize all the county final yields and stuff, so those don't get paid until June. So say you sign up this March, those aren't gonna get paid until June of 26. So cash flow wise is a little bit different, and it's not an upfront claim payment.
And just make sure that if you have ARC at the FSA, you can't have SEO with us, but you can't have ECO on top of that.
Ben, you want to add any more to that?
I think we covered most of it.
Yeah.
Now the goofy thing for this year is that ECO and SEO are still March 15th, it's just that the.
Yes, you have to select it by March 15th.
Right.
But it will not be paid until the following year. And you don't have to have, you personally do not have to have a loss to receive an ECO, SEO payment. Or vice versa, you may have a personal loss and you won't get the other payments.
So just to review, you have to have PLC to do the SEO, right?
Correct.
But not for the ECO.
Right.
There's all sorts of things.
That's why I want my program.
Any other questions?
I guess with the new administration, I don't know how that interacts or what that does. Is there any potential for changes within RMA or?
Not for this year.
And it's probably early on, so.
Any changes will be for 2026.
The biggest change they made was the increase in subsidy. Used to be with ECO subsidized at 44%, guys looked more towards SEO because it was already at 65, but now with them being equal, that's been the biggest change.
All right, moving on to the livestock side of things for a couple questions here. So there's been a lot of discussion about LRP unborn calves. So what's the big difference between endorsing LRP unborn calves and just the regular LRP endorsement? All right, we'll start over with them.
On the unborn and born calves, the one drawback is you stop at 599 pounds. So after that, that's where your base is going to be quoted at. It's always better if you feel like the market's not going to fluctuate anytime soon. Wait till you know what you have. Then if you want to look at price amount November, December, whenever you don't market your cattle. And you don't have to, you can start at 100%, or pick your break-even point. Hey, this is my break-even point, that's where I want to stop my coverage at. We can go there.
All right, for our last question we have written out here, we're going to start with Kelly, and then either of you two are welcome to weigh in. So how is an LRP payout calculated if the market price falls below my coverage price?
I have to make a disclaimer here. I know enough to get you in the office and introduce you to Caleb, who is our expert. And he will be at Bird City next week, so I suggest y'all find out and see. I know that the market determines the prices, like I said, and that's to get you in the office.
So LRP is based off the Feeder Cattle Cash Index board. That changes daily. Quotes come out every single day after 3:30. You have the option to purchase coverage then before 8:30 in the morning. LRP really is just going to set a floor in price for you. I think when we talk about calculating payments, the opportunity is there. With LRP, whether you look at doing unborn or you look at doing an 081 or 082 contract, the ability to set a floor right now in very high markets. Cal and I've had this conversation. It seems like a no-brainer, but when we all wear farmer hats, it does cost to do that. So it is subsidized. The thing with LRP that some guys get a little bit confused about, and we're all kind of known to this too, is it's not based on when you take your calves to the sale barn, what those calves bring. It's simply based on the day that you endorse coverage, what exactly the market closes that day. So you could take your calves to the sale barn in Oakley next week, and they could do really well, but we could see markets tank, and you could still generate a claim. When you look at doing coverage, you have the opportunity to buy a weight 1 or weight 2 contract from 13 weeks all the way out to 42 weeks. So looking at 42 weeks, we're already into almost November. So those prices have been out there and those change daily. When we think about a claim, so what's going to happen is you're going to sell your calves, you're going to either run them on Superior, you're going to take them to the sale barn, or you're going to retain ownership. You could lock in heifers, and you could still retain ownership. If there's a claim, you just need proof of livestock documentation, and then also just any sale receipts. If you retain ownership, guys will just give me a letter from the vet office as well. But what happens is on the day that the market closes when you are endorsed, it'll be the difference in prices between your endorsement price and that market close price, times how many head did you have endorsed, times your coverage level and your weight. So that is kind of the The nice thing about LRP, which is bankers like this, and most farmers and ranchers like this, is you don't have any indemnity, you don't have any premiums due up front. Very different than, doing a contract or something. You have no premiums due until after your endorsement ends. So you can go ahead and lock in cattle now, and then either pay for it later, or it'll get taken out of your claim later. Yeah, questions?
Have they ever thought about adding arrangement dates for the contract ending? Just because, like you said, with high prices, it's volatile markets. If I buy the LRP contract ends in 3 days, and I sell them today, and the price goes up the next 3 days, I get theoretically the short end of the stick on the cash, and then I get the price out of my LRP. Is there been any talk about adding, like, perhaps just a 15-day window? In this time frame market, and you get that days?
RMA did change that here a couple years ago. LRP does give you the option to sell 60 days before. So you have the opportunity to sell 60 days before. Hopefully no one works for RMA in the room. But there is opportunities, like if you end up needing to sell later just based on market, or even before 60 days. They'll accept letters from veterinarians, they'll accept letters from really anyone in the ag sector. K-State Research and Extension people have wrote letters before, just stating if there was a reason why, that maybe the endorsed date changed, based on, the timing and stuff. So there is that opportunity.
And just remember that they're just like calls and puts. So if you wanna insure 13 weeks out, which is the shortest interval, your premium's not gonna be as much. But if you wanna go for up for 42 weeks, it's just like a call or put. The further you go out, to lock that price in, the more premium it's gonna cost you too, so.
Any questions on that? All right. Well, that concludes the list of questions we've laid out here. So go ahead, feel free to ask any questions that you have. Nothing?
I'm sure Dan does.
I'll just say you like it.
I've got one I want to ask, but it's the same one I've asked you before, but that only, not only him, RMA would like to have irrigation coverage that is geared to cover declining wells, but they've really struggled to come up with products that people have felt acceptable. And because that thing hasn't fit, we've just wrote specialized agreements. From the K-State's side, I think our RMA is still trying to work on this. So I guess for that type of tool to actually work, what needs to be done to make it better fit what people are doing? And these are, they're trying to, they'll use yield, they're looking at the water yield relationships to design crop insurance tools that can adjust for water availability.
You're talking about the Lehman water, what you're talking about.
Yes, right.
There's written agreement opportunities to do in this water agreement.
The written agreements are what we're using, but they're looking at,
I've never done a written agreement. Kelly, you've been with Betty on the limited?
Yes, I have 2.
But I mean, you've got to send that off to RMA, and RMA will come back with a yield that you may not like, so.
Right now, like I said, I have 2 that are active, and they've almost brought their limited irrigation APH to their old unit. So I'm hoping that RMA's seeing that and seeing what other direction up we can go. Because written agreements take time. They take, we have to collect information, we have to have, insurers come in and sign more stuff, and yeah.
We do written agreements because we haven't been able to find, and this is my own opinion, because we haven't been able to find a good fit that actually matches what happens to yields when water goes down.
Right.
So we do written agreements to just find a spot.
Right. Written agreements are very important. Like I said, they tell RMA that they need to be working on this. Spring wheat written agreements tells RMA, hey, we need to be looking at this. So if you have something that you're interested in, talk to your agent. If there is a written agreement, I encourage you to, go down that avenue, because That is the only way RMA is going to know what we need out here. So, you know, squeaky wheel gets the grease. Let RMA know.
We're currently doing cotton in Colorado right now. He's growing cotton before, so.
Just kind of, brings together with the marketing plan, if I remember right, Ron Barnaby put together crop insurance for his original district, part of Barnaby, K-State. And his intention, I believe, at that time was that farmers could use the crop insurance in order to better market their crops. Is there a discussion on how that might work using your levels, or is everybody fairly comfortable with that as far as being able to get your prices set, according to your crop insurance that you can expect? Maybe that's more than a marketing guy.
To me, that would be more of a marketing guy, more of an economist. I like to give you all your options and let you make your decisions. I do not know your ins and outs, so that's kind of where I come from. But, that'd be an interesting,
For example, if you would, for contracts, your guaranteed bushels, that would be a good use. You know you're gonna at least get those guaranteed, and you know that they're gonna, the market price is gonna go up, but then things go up, so your forward contract will be a lot better.
Yeah, that's knowing your break evens and your cost of production and know what you could, that could be a potential risk management tool.
There's a study done of farmers in the farm credit system that included those in Illinois and Indiana. And out of that study, turns out, you know, they had such infrequent losses that they could afford to buy up to 85% coverage. And that was, in essence, their revenue protection, their marketing plan. And so they were counting on those revenue, you know, the February and, well, for corn, the February determination and the harvest determination as marketing coverage. So I think that maybe that's a little bit what you're talking about, that we can't afford to buy up to 85.
I mean, even from county to county, the difference in premiums and prices is unbelievable to me. And you don't have to go very far.
I would say though, I think you're talking about too, like the guaranteed bushels on your bottom of your schedule, like that is a safe spot to start looking. You could look at it by your field or by farm. Cause at the bottom it'll show you.
Yeah, the guaranteed bushel, that is definitely a good starting point for your marketing plan. I mean, you know, depending on where you're at in the year. But from a price protection, it's important to remember, if you are buying revenue coverage, you have a built-in call option into your crop insurance, because if price does go up, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, you do actually buy, you get more insurance in the back. And so your production does not change, but if your harvest price is $1 higher, you get to calculate your revenue protection at the $1 higher price. And so you have that a built-in call option in your crop insurance. And so if you do forward contract some bushels of your guaranteed production, and you grow those, but you still have a crop insurance claim, you actually participate in some of that gain because of the call option built into the revenue policy. So it kind of, yes, Tim, that's a great,
Especially
yes.
if you don't have.
Yes, the big difference that what crop insurance misses, that it does not protect is all those bases. And that's where you can really run into some issues on using your guaranteed bushels. If we would be the big one right now, if we're at a 60-cent basis when we plant wheat and we go to $1.50, and the price stays the same on the board, we're still gonna give up that entire basis on our crop insurance. So our revenue, because ultimately we're looking at revenue, not just bushels, we're not just price. And so that's the one hiding thing in the background is
talking about in the study there in Illinois is, you know, these products like SEO and ECO, these are, a lot of them, is what I've heard is, they make these for the Corn Belt. So you gotta realize the Corn Belt's an 85% enterprise unit. So when they get, and their premium isn't much at all. So those costs aren't really all that high until you get out here to Western Kansas, and like Kelly said, man, our premiums get skyrocketed through the roof. And like Zoe said, on the ECO, they helped that price out quite a bit by subsidizing that, so.
It's really interesting too if you're at the board, which I know a lot about, but if you go to agmanager.com and you look up like ECO, SEO acres in 2024, I'm trying to remember these off the top of my head, but I think in Sheridan County in 2024 there was like 36,000 acres of ECO and SEO. Thomas County maybe like 17,000-ish. Go County was quite a bit less, but just the surrounding counties, there's a lot of acres being planted with ECO and SEO coverage. But it is interesting. You can see a map. It shows all the average yields and stuff per county. So.
Do you see them using satellite data to approve planning dates?
I think they already have started. I mean, I think there's a lot of discussion with that. So like Kelly said, honesty is the best policy. And right, we see a lot of different data integrations as things in our world get really
More precision farming will be, that'll be bringing it to truth too.
Yeah. Even if you run a field view report or whatever, it's going to show you. So.
I did put some of our seasonal newsletters on the table over there that we send out seasonal. So please feel free to take one if you have any questions. Our contact number, our contact information is inside. We'd love to answer any questions you have, whether you utilize us for your crop insurance or somebody else. We don't care. We just want to be there for the farmer.
I got a question back on the, kind of the written plan that Dan talked about in regards to irrigation and whatnot. So let's say here in 3 years, I'm only gonna be allowed to pump X number of gallons of water on the surface of the corn, let's say.
Right?
And it's fully irrigated, and I've built my pH up. But I know I'm not gonna be able to go fully irrigated, it's gonna be limited irrigated. So what you're saying is if I know that in advance, I can do this written plan and everything, and get a quote-unquote limited irrigated policy
That, right.
for just that 1 year.
Written agreements are an annual renewal right now. There are some that you can get multi-year, but I haven't gotten one of those yet. So we do our written agreements over every year. So I wouldn't get excited about a written agreement until you're ready to reduce that water intake, water usage. When you're ready to do that, get with your agent, say, hey, this is what I want a written agreement to ensure these acres at a lower rate. And the first one, of course, is always the hardest. You gotta collect all the water usage information over the last 10 years to prove how much water it took to raise how many bushels. And then they have their little scientific formulas, and they can tell you what they believe that you're able to raise on your reduced irrigated.
So then, the production for that year, is that gonna affect my fully irrigated APH?
No, you will have two separate units, and you will use those until, yeah. If you're not going to use the limited irrigation, then you can use the fully irrigated one. But you'll have two units, two different databases.
I'll give you, for instance, on that there, we had back when I was working for an insurance company, we had a guy in the Sheridan County district that when he planted a half circle of corn, he was raising 200 bushel corn. When he was raising a full circle of corn, it was like 45, 50 bushel. Well, RMA happened to participate on that claim. Rainfall doesn't not affect you on how much water you pump. So 15 inches is what you consider a full irrigator practice in this area. He had pumped like 13 inches, but he also got like 5 inches of rain around the 1st of August. So what does any farmer do? They shut the water off. Because why would we get a pump of water? Well, they said he didn't pump it full amount. So they dropped him down. It cost him about 80 grand on that pivot. But they refused to pay him on. But if you look at his history, they weren't necessarily wrong. But that is what they can do. And the larger the farmer you are, the more they're going to look at you.
Anything else? All right.
What did you say was irrigated? What is fully irrigated? Did you say?
Fully irrigated is when you have to pump at least 15 inches of water,
15.
which most of our stuff out here isn't going to pump that. I mean, I'm pumping. Well, I only pump half my water rights on my pivot, and we kept it running almost a whole year. You know, so it's yeah.
So how does the water availability, or what you can pump, whether physically or legislative, or however you believe it, how is that affecting the crop insurance? You know, fully irrigated is pumping as much water as you can, right? You know, but you're not getting that 15 inches. So is it, what is that called? Is that not called a fully irrigated circle? Or is
Fully
that-
irrigated is, being able to supply water to that crop at essential times to make your APH.
So it's not based upon inches or?
It's not based upon inches, it's based upon, are you able to provide water to that plant
But then what
to
fell apart?
produce the
In the
APH?
example you were just, then, given that reasoning, then why when he only pumped 13, had rain only had to pump 13, why was that cut down?
That was just, I mean, when they participate on that deal, that's anything
Oh,
RMA says.
and that was
is
the
what you
Lima,
have
that
to
was
do.
within the Lima?
That was within
Oh,
Lima.
that wasn't the crop insurance, that was the Lima regulations.